Hi everyone, it's Chef Rose, and it's day 2 of Petit Fours. And today we are going to do French Madeleine cookies, and we're going to do the Sarah Bernhardt's, which I talked about before, using some of the little Decois that we made a couple weeks ago. So if you've never had a French Madeleine, it's a cookie, but it's kind of a sponge cake. But there's the pan that you would use, and it's a non-stick pan. And I was so excited to have bought some last year for us to use in class, but certainly you can find them on Amazon. You want to buy non-stick for sure. You'd probably want to buy at least two. You can certainly do one, but then you'd have to clean it if you have more than enough batter to do two pans. So I would invest in two pans at least. This recipe will make a full two pans. And then here's the little Decois that I piped out from 2 weeks ago, and I kept them in the freezer. And remember, Decois is a meringue with some nuts, and these had hazelnuts. So on top of these, we're going to make a ganache, and I'm going to make a raspberry ganache today. Pipe the ganache on top, let it set, and then dip them in a chocolate glaze. So for right now, part one of this video, we're going to do some of the components that we need. We need to brown some butter for the Madeleines, and then we're going to make the chocolate raspberry ganache and chocolate glaze in this first part video. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and put this down. All right. So the first thing I want to do, this is 4 ounces of unsalted butter. Let me move the Madeleine pan. 4 ounces of unsalted butter. And if you remember from when we browned the butter, basically just melt it and let it go until it browns. So I've got it on a medium low. Just going to let that go. So basically once it's brown, we want to get it off the heat. So I'm going to have a container here to pour it into. All right, so while that's going, I'm going to take a 8-ounce or a half pint of heavy cream, and we're going to heat that. Put it into a small saucepan. All right. And I have so we're going to do 8 ounces of cream, 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. So if you see, I bought a 5-pound package of Calabo semi-sweet chocolate on Amazon. It's a 54%, and they come in those little, they call them Calais or little disc, and they're great to eat, of course. It's a really good price, too, on Amazon. And so now I have plenty of semi-sweet chocolate. So here's the raspberry preserves I'm going to put into the heavy cream. And I'm not going to really measure it. I'm going to just put a couple of teaspoons here of the raspberry reserves. Give it a nice flavor. You could always do a raspberry liqueur, but certainly this is what I had, and it's going to work just fine. So I'm going to heat the cream till it's hot, and then add the chocolate. Remember, we don't want the cream to boil. So you heat up the raspberry preserves with the heavy cream. You could use apricot. Now see, there's a big chunk of raspberry. It's not a very smooth preserves. It's kind of chunky. So I want to make sure I get rid of that before I try to pipe. All right, so we're just going to heat that up until it gets hot, but again, doesn't boil. And I have my chocolate for it. So 8 ounces of semi-sweet. So 8 ounces of heavy cream, a few teaspoons of raspberry preserves, and the 8 ounces of chocolate. All right, I hear my butter kind of sizzling, and that's okay. You don't have to stir it. but you can. Okay, so if you remember when we did this, you basically melt it and just let it go till it starts to brown. It's going to sizzle a little bit, and that's fine. And when it stops sizzling, you'll actually start to see the solids start to brown, and that's what you want. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit. All right, for the chocolate glaze, it's 12 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate, 6 ounces of butter, which I've cut up, 2 ounces of water, and 2 ounces of corn syrup. If you don't have corn syrup, you can use honey. Just put a little bit in. Perfect. All right. So we're going to heat that up until the butter melts, and then add the chocolate. So the glaze is pretty simple. The ganache is pretty simple. Just getting all our components made. Oh, I'm sure you can hear that sizzling and plopping away. You want to be careful. It will kind of bubble up a little bit, so watch your hands. The brown butter is going to add a wonderful flavor to these madeleines. It's just awesome. So anytime you have a recipe that you're making and it uses melted butter, you can always brown it to get a really nice flavor. All right, let's ganache the cream. Starting to warm up. Got my glaze ingredients back there, starting to melt. Let's get a little stir on that. Remember, chocolate will melt as little as 100 degrees. So again, I don't have to boil any of this. I don't have to boil the glaze mixture here with the butter. I don't have to boil the cream. If you do boil the cream, your finished ganache might be a little curdled, a little separated. So you want to be careful with that. All right, brown butter's sizzling away. Just kind of let it do its thing. Ooh, it's really popping. All right. How's everyone doing? Good. Good. Now the brown butter, all of these components I want to let cool down. I want the brown butter to cool down before I mix it into our Madeleine batter. So that's why I'm doing that. I want the ganache to set a little bit before I pipe it. I can't pipe it when it's really warm, so that's got to set. And the same with the glaze. I don't want to use the glaze to dip the cookie or the ganache into when it's really hot. So brown butter, I've seen recipes where they brown butter and make chocolate chip cookies. But again, you got to make it, and then you kind of have to let it cool before you use it. So it's very, very hot. It's well over boiling, over 212. All right, I'm going to stir it just to kind of see, but be very careful. It's hard in a nonstick pan. You can't really see the browning as much, so you kind of have to go based on that sizzling when the sizzling stops. And once you've made it a couple times, you'll know. All right, my cream is ready. All right, cream's nice and hot. Add the 8 ounces of semi-sweet. Remember, you can't make a ganache with white chocolate or milk chocolate. It's got to be a semi-sweet of 50%, or you can use a 60% if you'd like. But you don't want to use milk or white chocolate. And just stir it. All right, the glaze recipe back there, good. Butter's melted. Mixture is getting hot, even starting to bubble around the sides. Turn that off. Pour in the 12 ounces of chocolate. And just like the ganache, just kind of let it sit, stir it. All right, so you still hear that sizzling of the butter. It's starting to slow down. That means the salads, the milk salads, are starting to get color. All right, let's go look at the butter. Again, be very careful. Beautiful. Actually, when I stir, I can start to see the brown milk salads at the bottom. See how the sizzling's starting to slow down? Perfect. Turn off the heat. Even leave it in the pan. It'll start to keep browning a little bit. Let's check our ganache. Good. Ganache, you don't really want to use a whisk. You don't want to incorporate a lot of air. So just stir until it comes together. So with the brown butter, be careful. You can burn it, so you want to get it just to the right point. And if you find that it's not brown to your satisfaction, then reheat it. But if you go too far, you can't fix it. All right, ganache has come together. Good. Let's give a stir to our glaze. Ugh. You could smell how good it smells. The brown butter smells amazing. All right, see how that's come together? Good. Now the glaze you can whisk. But I'm going to put that aside. Let's get the brown butter out of the pan and into a glass dish to cool. All right. So I will scrape that later to make sure I get all those beautiful brown milk salads in that butter for sure. I probably could have gone a little bit more, but you can see, if you look sideways, you see the nice color. It's still going to add a nice flavor to the Madeleines. All right. Ganache looks good. All right, the glaze, let me grab a whisk. Okay. Give that a good whisk to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now the glaze I'm going to keep in the pan. I could pour that out for sure to set it up, but it will start to cool in the pan. And I don't need it for a little while, so it should be okay. I just don't want it super hot when I dip the cookies or the ganache into it. All right, that's good. Ganache looks great too. So the ganache I want to set up and set up quickly, so I'm going to pour it into a larger pan. So let's move the butter out of the way. All right. So the ganache I'm going to pour into this glass pie dish so that it'll firm up pretty quickly so I can pipe it. Just pour it in. It's very hot. So I can leave it at room temp and it will start to set up. You could certainly refrigerate it if you want to go faster. You just got to be careful that it doesn't sit up too firm. I want it to be like frosting like, so I could pipe it. And there you go. There's our raspberry ganache. Okay, move that to a side. I'm gonna go ahead and scrape in my browned butter salads, because that's where the flavor is. So you don't want to strain it. You don't want to get, you want these brown salads because they're going to add really good, nice, nutty flavor. Okay. So there's my brown butter. There's my ganache. And there's my glaze. And I've got these 3 components. So join me for part 2 when we put the Sarah Bernhardt's pipe the ganache onto the meringue base, and we'll make the Madeleine cookie batter, and that's going to need time to rest in the refrigerator after we make it. So there'll be 2 more parts for these videos. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.